Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Lore Files. Tonight, we're journeying into the shadows of Asia to uncover two terrifying true encounters with the supernatural. From the sterile hallways of a hospital in the Philippines to a lonely apartment in South Korea, these stories will make you question what lurks just beyond our sight. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Tonight, we're journeying into the shadows of Asia to uncover two terrifying true encounters with the supernatural. From the sterile hallways of a hospital in the Philippines to a lonely apartment in South Korea, these stories will make you question what lurks just beyond our sight. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Have you ever walked through a hospital and felt a sudden, inexplicable chill? A creeping sensation that you're not quite alone, that unseen eyes are following your every move. For one nurse in the Philippines, this feeling was a daily reality. Our first story comes from a nurse who used to work in one of the oldest and most historic hospitals in Manila. She wasn't just in any part of the hospital. She was assigned to one of the most intense and emotionally charged areas imaginable, the operating room complex. Imagine a place where life and death hang in the balance every single day. This complex was split into two distinct blocks. The right block was for scheduled, routine operations, but the left block, that was a different story. It handled emergencies, trauma cases, and OB-GYN procedures. This was the place where life was often snatched away without warning. As you might guess, the entire complex had a reputation. It was known to be haunted, with each block boasting its own collection of ghosts, spirits seen and felt by countless nurses, residents, and even seasoned surgeons. It was a seemingly ordinary night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The nurse was chatting with her friend, who was still shaken from seeing a ghostly figure on their wing the previous night. The nurse mentioned her own experience, hearing the disembodied voice of a little girl while working in the other block. Her friend just laughed, a nervous, chilling laugh. She warned her that the ghosts in their current block were different. They were more aggressive, more present. Why? Because many of the patients who died there suffered traumatic, violent ends, stabbed, shot, victims of horrific accidents. They weren't prepared to die, and it seemed some of them never truly left. Later, our nurse entered the operating room she was assigned to for the night, relieving the nurse from the previous shift. As she began assisting a surgeon with a routine cholecystectomy, one of her colleagues brought up her earlier conversation. "What were you and your friend talking about?" they asked. Hesitantly, as she replied, "We were just talking about the ghost she saw last night in room 11. Curiosity piqued, they asked if she actually believed in such things. "I do," she admitted. "I felt their presence all over the OR complex. Almost every room is haunted. That opened the floodgates." One by one, the other medical staff in the room began sharing their own eerie experiences, all having taken place within those same walls. The air in the sterile room suddenly felt heavy with stories of the unseen. The operation was dragging on, taking much longer than expected. While waiting for the X-ray technician to arrive, the team decided to take a short break. The circulating nurse brought in some chairs. Exhausted from the long night, our nurse sat down and quickly began to doze off. Suddenly, she felt it, a distinct cold touch on her cheek, like a single icy finger pressing against her skin. Her eyes snapped open. She scanned the room, looking for the prankster. But the surgeons were asleep in their chairs. The other nurses were busy with procedures in other rooms. There was no one near her. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was just her overactive imagination, fueled by the ghost stories and the late hour. She closed her eyes again, trying to find a moment of rest. But whatever was in that room with her was not finished. It wasn't satisfied with a simple touch. As she started drifting back to sleep, the presence grew bolder, its energy more intense. The chair she was sitting on was nudged, a firm, deliberate push, That was it. She shot up from the chair, wide awake, goosebumps erupting all over her arms and legs. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Without a second thought, she abandoned her post, leaving the sleeping surgeons to fend for themselves as she scrambled to find her colleagues, desperate not to be alone in that room for another second. For our second story, we traveled to South Korea, where a recent move into a new apartment turned into a terrifying ordeal for an American military spouse. She had arrived in South Korea just 5 months prior to join her husband, who was in the army. They settled into an apartment, and for the first month or so, everything was normal. But then, about 2.5 months into their stay, a strange feeling began to creep in. It was that familiar, icy sensation of being watched when she was completely alone. For weeks, it was just a feeling, an unsettling presence with no other activity. That is, until one night. Her husband was away for field training, leaving her alone in the apartment. It was a typical evening. She got ready for bed, called her husband to say goodnight, and fell asleep around 12:30 a.m. About 2 hours later, she found herself in a recurring dream she'd had before, but this time it was different. In the dream, an unknown, powerful force was pressing down on her back. It had 2 handfuls of her hair, yanking it, holding her down so she couldn't move. She woke up with a gasp, her heart pounding. The spot on her head where the force had been pulling her hair in the dream was throbbing with a phantom pain. Shaken, she tried to dismiss it as just a vivid nightmare, her mind playing tricks on her. She managed to fall back asleep a short time later. But the dream wasn't over. It resumed exactly where it had left off, the invisible force holding her down by her hair. This happened one more time before she finally gave up on sleep. Terrified, she decided to just stay awake until morning. It was around 5 a.m. As she lay there in the dark, she heard it. A man's voice speaking in Korean. It was deep, guttural, and she couldn't make out any words she recognized. It sounded less like talking and more like he was hissing the words. The sheer malice and the tone sent a wave of terror through her. By this point, she was petrified. Then came the other noises, knocking sounds from somewhere in the apartment. The distinct scrape of her dining chairs being scooted across the floor. This went on for what felt like an eternity, but was probably close to an hour. Then a new sound started. Scratching. It began on her walls, soft and short at first. She tried to ignore it, burying her head under the covers, but it grew louder, harder, and more frantic with each passing moment. The sound was insistent, angry. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. It felt like her heart was going to burst out of her chest. With a surge of adrenaline, she leaped out of bed and flicked on every single light in the house. Instantly, the noises stopped. The silence was just as terrifying. She got dressed and cautiously looked around the apartment. Her blood ran cold. Her dining chairs had been moved. Small objects on her tables and counters were out of place. And then she saw it. On the wall, exactly where the sound had been coming from, were fresh scratch marks. It was about 6:30 in the morning when she fled the apartment. She knew she couldn't stay there another night. She immediately started looking for a new place to live, certain that whatever was in that home was only going to get worse, more violent. And that's all the time we have for tonight. What would you have done in these situations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the dark. Stay safe and see you next time.